I think it's time to begin. So as we did yesterday, I want to just acknowledge the land that we are working on here in Victoria, British Columbia, which is the land of the Lekwungen speaking people, also known as the Songhees and the Esquimalt. And we feel very honored to be right here with you all over the world on your lands. So welcome.
We do the Territorial Acknowledgement in the hopes that the work we do in Appreciative Inquiry in some tiny way can work in the service of reconciliation with First Nations, not just here in Canada, but around the world. So, Amanda, we just want to do a sound light check with you. Are we all sounding okay and good to go?
Sound great. Yeah.
And just, Amanda said if you had a question, but also if you have a comment. There's lots of people in this conversation that also work in resilience work, and they may just have a comment they want to add from their own work. Please pop in anywhere to the conversation. This morning this is the second of 3, and this morning we're really going to focus on hope as the core resilience practice. But there's almost a little less than half of you that weren't here yesterday by the poll, and so we're going to spend a few minutes kind of talking about the appreciative resilience model and a minute about appreciative inquiry. Kind of before we start any of that, there are some people who weren't with us yesterday. You'll notice that Jeannie and I are not 2 meters apart, 6 feet apart. We're life partners and business partners and co-authors, and we live in Victoria, British Columbia, on what is today an amazing sunny day. And I know this isn't true for many people on this call. But this morning we live on an island, Vancouver Island. This morning on Vancouver Island, there were no new cases of COVID on Vancouver Island. Now, whether that's going to hold or not is unknown to everyone. But it's a moment of celebration, of course, on the island this morning that we have a place to perhaps, as they say, begin to flatten that incredible curve. And I also wanted to say this morning, coming out of yesterday's conversation, that we deeply understand what people are dwelling with at this moment. Maybe their partners are healthcare workers. Maybe they're healthcare workers themselves, or frontline workers, or grocery store clerks, or, this is a moment where we reside in this incredible wave of hope and fear every day. And we just want to kind of acknowledge that as we begin our conversation this morning, that this is a moment in our day as we come together where we can hopefully uplift each other and provide resilience to each other in order to deal with the things that are there for us every moment as we go through this. Because it's not just the pandemic. We have all the other things in our lives that we're also dealing with. People being forced to work at home and that it's not comfortable for them. People not being able to work at home when they want to be able to work at home. People being out of work, people not knowing what their financial future is going to be like. There is so much going on for people, and just the regular kinds of things that happen in our lives. And so we want to deeply kind of appreciate that that's kind of the context in which we come together in this kind of uncertain time.
And that's one of the reasons we started with despair yesterday, because we don't always start with despair because it's a difficult place to be, as Joan's describing, where we all are in various layers of the difficulties right now. And I think it was very powerful. We felt very moved by the conversations that we were part of, and we could hear from you as well. So, but now it's time to move to hope, because I think that's what will keep us going through this, and holding on to the hope and practicing hope is really our intention this morning, is to, the power of that, the power of hope as we work through challenging times and through despair. So that's where we're going.
So I think we're going to share the screen with you for a few minutes. For those of you who were with you yesterday, you know, I blithely said that yesterday too, and then it didn't happen. But hopefully it'll happen this morning when I do this.
This is our first task in hope, is to hope it'll work.
And we're just going to take a minute to return to a few concepts from yesterday. We're not going to dwell there, but just a minute or two so that people who weren't on the call yesterday can kind of catch up a little bit. So let's see if we can get this going this morning. Okay, so Amanda, tell me if that's actually moving when I do that. Ah, delight. So yesterday we really focused on this notion of despair, and you can see it in this circle, and we're going to come to this circle again in a minute. But that was kind of what we focused on yesterday. And today we're going to talk about hope. So I'm going to kind of move us through there to hope. So what you see on the screen is the appreciative resilience model that Jeannie and I have worked on with other leaders with their input over the last few years. And we ended up working in resilience because this was something people kept saying to us. You know, we need to understand how it is we can help people in our lives and our work undertake the practice of resilience. And maybe that's the first thing that I would say, and we said this yesterday too, that resilience, we profoundly believe, the more we study it, is that it's a practice. It is like polishing a stone of our abilities. It's not something that we arrive at that is obvious, that we just kind of pick up and we go, oh, today I need to be resilient, and so I'm going to pick up the skill. It's something we practice. And you see in this center circle in this model, the interlocking circles of hope, despair, and forgiveness. The more we study about resilience, we profoundly believe that the practice of resilience is residing in these three circles of hope, despair, and forgiveness, and their interaction. The practice of hope and a hopeful view on a daily basis. The focus on strengths in times of despair, and the powerful will to forgive. And tomorrow we're going to talk about that will in forgiveness. So that's the inside of this model. And today we're going to play with hope, which we believe is the very core of resilience.
And the outside circle, of course, is the appreciative inquiry. And as Joan says, we have so much experience coming in and working with clients around anything from strategic planning, big summits and events, to teamwork, to coaching, and so on. And as we work with appreciative inquiry, the important things, well, we work with groups especially, was often people would say, wow, does that always happen? So they had a plan for something like, you know, figuring out their next steps in their business plan or whatever. But they found that what they also got with, along with the appreciative inquiry process, and for something very practical like a plan, was the connection with each other. So we're not just talking about individual resilience, we're seeing it in teams and groups, that people can become resilient together because they become authentic with each other and connected. And I'm just thinking about right now in the world, this is what's happening. As we individually are interested in our own resilience, right now we are connecting across and around the world for that social connection, in a true social connection, not physically, but really speaking our minds and our hearts about our stories and what's going on. We are creating that resilience because we are creating the hope together, which is so powerful. And that's what the appreciative inquiry, in our experience, has done. In all cases we've worked on, people say, wow, there's that other layer. We're connected together and we see each other and we're authentic and we're present. And so, you know, the processes, well, we touched on a few processes, and we're, you know, there's whole training that you can do on all these different processes. But One of the really important things is the principles too, and we touched on a couple of them yesterday, and today we wanted to just touch on a couple more. One was the notion of the poetic, and I think maybe I should let the poet talk about that. What do you think? The poetic.
Well, the poetic principle in appreciative inquiry is the idea that we craft what it is we choose to see. The poetic principle, and this is something that, as Jeannie jokingly just said, is close to my heart, right? The way in which we parse the words we use, the ways in which we choose what to focus on. That's what the poetic principle brings to this work, that when we look at our environment, what is it we see? Mm-hmm. And, when we asked in the chat for you to throw into the chat something that kind of described your hope today, that's kind of pushing you into that poetic place, because you scan your world and you go, oh, that thing is representative of hope. And that's what the poetic principle brings to this work, the power to choose our words and the ways in which we focus and what we undertake. And the second one, principle we wanted to look at today, was the notion of positivity, which exists in appreciative inquiry work, which isn't just about the positive.
And I think that when you're choosing and using the poetic principle to choose what you're focusing on, we're suggesting, because we're talking about hope today, that the practice of hope is a good choice. If you choose to look at what's working, which is basically what appreciative inquiry is about, inquire into what's going well, and not ignoring what's going on, being appreciative of all of that, but focusing on and making that choice. And then the positivity is, as a lot of people interpret it, a way to look at what is working well, what they want more of, right? And that's the positive principle. So the questions you ask and the way you look at the world is practicing hope by saying there are possibilities here, even though this isn't what I expected. What is arising is providing opportunities and possibilities.
So this is the appreciative resilience model. In some ways, it is both simple and huge. It is both a life study and its most simplistic, just an interaction between the practices in these three states of being, of hope, despair, and forgiveness. So Amanda, we noticed the chat going by here. Is there anything that you want to pop up from the chat before we kind of move on to focusing specifically on hope?
Just unmute myself. I from Robin, that idealism is often dismissed, but where our attention goes, energy flows. I thought that was really
lovely.
Beautiful piece coming up there. And also from Todd saying that appreciation is vast and deep, because positivity often gets dismissed, and I know I've been accused of being called a Pollyanna before, so maybe if you could speak just for a second about that, that would be great.
Well, first let me say that I always think that Pollyanna is deeply underrated, but
what does it actually mean, right?
Being positive is not the same as kind of blithe believing it's going to be okay. And I was going to say this in a few minutes when we talk about hope, but probably one of the most powerful examples of that is Viktor Frankl's work, which has influenced a lot of our work in resilience. His ability to find humanity during the Holocaust in the most terrible of circumstances. Now, you wouldn't say that Viktor Frankl was being Pollyanna, but he used that poetic principle to think profoundly about what he could see that was the most incredible in humanity in the most complex of circumstances. And so, we do this idea that, oh, you're just being Pollyanna. But what if what you're doing is actually uplifting somebody else by helping their gaze move from hardship toward the sun? We're all heliotropic as human beings. We want to tilt our faces toward the sun. And I think it's easy to say that that's Pollyanna, but it's also deeply ingrained in our humanity to try and find some small grain of what makes us powerful human beings in the most complex of circumstances.
And I think what's wonderful is the research that's going on with people like research scientists like Barbara Fredrickson, who's doing research around the impact of positive emotions and positivity in order to be able to think broader and be more creative and be healthier. And it's so much broader than just what some people think of as positivity. And that kind of research is going on that really validates the notion of the power of hope, the power of positivity, and so on. Those good emotions.
And I think that's important for people with us this morning to know that there's quantitative research. You know, Barbara Fredrickson is probably one of the most prominent scientists around actually quantitative research around positivity. And so it's easy to go to her work and begin to understand how the notion of positivity can be measured, and when is it just Pollyanna, although I think she's underrated, and when is it focus on positivity.
And I think one of the most important things that I have got from Barbara Fredrickson is the notion of you can't be falsely positive. You have to be authentic in every situation. And in fact, if you're falsely positive, that's going to go in counter to what you're really hoping to be and hoping to be contributing to the world.
We have a hand up if we have a moment from Todd. So I'm just going to lower his hand and unmute him.
Okay, so just a quick question. So I'm a champion internally at our agency here, and what I find oftentimes goes back to this question of people come at life from a negative perspective. We're hardwired, go figure, is how we've been trained. And so I'm constantly faced with people who will hear this for the first time. And I've done a good job of being a champion. So let's be clear, I've done a great job. I'm good. But my point is, not blowing by the concept that people approach their lives from a deficit model. And that awareness is something I just have to keep in my mind, because I do tend to approach it from a glass half full, but I just wanted to get it out there that we live in a deficit wired world.
I think it's a really important point, Todd, that you raise, and we all do. I mean, all of us, that's our brains, our flight or fight, or part of our brain's going to react first. So how do we then move to the thinking part? And I think that's where the notions that Barbara Fredrickson brings in and other scientists is that how do we shift that? Well, one of the wonderful skills in appreciative inquiry is the ability to reframe, which is to take those and acknowledge those. And if you're working, as you're saying, with your team or your people that you're working with who come from that lens, is to acknowledge and validate that and say, okay, then if that's the deficits we're dealing with, how can we reframe those into what it is that we want more of? And then work with that. And then, with appreciative inquiry, discover where you already are doing even a little bits of that in order to then build and create more and really go further. Because if you just solve a deficit, you're often just getting back to status quo, as opposed to what you really want to do and what we have to do now. We're not going to get back to status quo after this pandemic. So where do we go? How do we reinvent? How do we recreate? We have to actually then say, well, what is it we do want? What's happening here that we can take further? That's a good thing. And for our business, some of it is actually learning to teach this way, or learning to present using webinars and so on, as an example, right? That may be a wonderful thing that we're going to be taking forward as we go forward, rather than just doing the same old things.
We said this earlier, but I'm just going to say it again as we kind of move into focusing on that one circle of hope this morning. Jeannie and I, in our work and our conversations with leaders, and let me define leadership for you this morning in the way Jeannie and I use it, we profoundly believe that anyone who is working in the service of another single human being is providing leadership. So we think about leadership as, it says so on your business card. Jeannie and I actually don't look at leadership that way. We look at leadership as people who are willing to work in the service of one other human being, a mother to their child, a child to their mother, a CEO to their entire organization. So you'll see this word leadership pop up, and we just wanted to quickly define it for a second. But where I was going with that is we represent the circles in the model equally. But there's no question in our conversations with leaders that the practice of hope on a daily basis is one of the cornerstones to building kind of what we call a resilient bank. You know, and there might be a moment in your life where that resilient bank just empties right out, like it just wasn't enough. And so it's not like it protects you, but it's a practice, a way to hone that poetic principle of where is it you're looking, what is it you're seeing. So we think that practicing hope is a key to resilience in that way. I'm looking at Jeannie thinking she's going to start talking in a second here.
Well, we've talked about hope, and I think we've actually said a lot of this. We've said all of it. But we love this picture. We just took it in a park nearby. The magnolia is just starting out on this bare tree. So we thought it was a beautiful picture. And what else do we want to say about hope, Joe?
The only other thing I want to say about hope before perhaps we send you off to have a conversation with each other and we stop sharing the screen, and maybe I'll just stop sharing the screen to say this actually so I can see everybody, is hope for us is not defined as getting what you want. It's not thinking that by next Tuesday I'm going to have this thing. Hope for us in our definition and our work in resilience is really that notion that Viktor Frankl brings to hope, that there are things worthy of uplifting, no matter how complex the situation. You know, people are going out on the street all over the world and banging pots and pans at night for healthcare workers and frontline workers, and they're doing that as a practice of hope. Mm-hmm. They can't promise those people that they will be safe for another day, but they're saying to them, we see you, let us uplift you. And that really is our definition of hope. It's not that I hope something will happen by Tuesday. It's the abiding practice of seeing something within a situation that is worthy of life-giving. And so we're going to send you off in a minute or two to spend some time with each other talking about hope. But maybe before that, Amanda, do we want to go back to the chat? Or does anybody have
what's in there? Because we're not looking at the chat.
Hand up that they want to say something?
There's just a lot of agreement towards your definition of leadership. That was incredibly powerful for a lot of people I'm seeing on the call here. Does anybody want to speak to anything that Joan and Jeannie just said or add a comment at this time? Okay. I think we're probably ready. Oh, Kathleen saying, hope my husband is out there on the front line. The neighborhood has been mowing our yard. That's really beautiful, Kathleen.
So to me, that's what hope is.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that mowing the yard is going to keep them safe. Mm-hmm. It's that the mowing the yard is an act of hope.
Yeah.
And
I was going to say my daughter works at the grocery store, and I am so thankful people have put balloons up around the grocery store and left chalk drawings. And my daughter's only 16, so to know how appreciated she is, that for me, that gives me hope. So I just wanted to add that too.
And we appreciate her working at our grocery store. So thank her very much. I just wanted to say about practice of hope. I think just walking around, as we're all trying to do, to get a little bit of exercise and being out in that sunshine, which gives me hope. Wow, the sunshine helps. Is just when people go around, so to be that 6 feet apart, and they say thank you if I've gone around them, or we say thank you as they go around us, and just that notion of just seeing each other in this time in simple ways. Hope can be practiced in many ways. I think it's about being present and authentic in the world ourselves and seeing others in terms of what they're giving to the world. And often it's a smile. I mean, what a wonderful way to keep hope going around the world. The smiles. And that's one of the things I like about Zoom. Can we all smile at each other right now? I want to see you. So, wow, the smiles I can see you just feel so good. Thank you.
So we're going to send you off to have a conversation about hope in breakout rooms, and I'm going to send you there in a second. I'm not going to share the screen with the questions. I'm just going to read them to you, and I'll read them to you twice so you can remember them. When you get to your breakout room, just take a second to introduce yourself to the people you find there with you. Tell a short story and make sure that you're kind of attending to everybody having a chance to talk. There'll be 4 or 5 people in the group with you. How are you practicing hope and a hopeful view during this time of pandemic? What is it you're doing on a daily basis that's feeding that resilience bank? And so we're going to send you off. What are you doing in this time of the COVID pandemic that's feeding that resilience bank, that's feeding the hope and a hopeful view? What are you practicing every day?